Welcome back, everyone. Michael here with Offshore Citizen, and today we're going to discuss the subject of AML, or anti-money laundering. So I've done a video, I don't know if it's up yet, but it may be by the time we do this, on what is money laundering, and today we're going to talk about anti-money laundering. And in particular, this is just about you understanding how to maintain an effective relationship with your financial institutions by understanding the things that may make them concerned and put them at risk, right? So you kind of need to understand, I think that a part of any healthy relationship, any working relationship, et cetera, is to understand where the other parties are coming from and be able to kind of work accordingly. So this is where, for instance, let's just dive into it. So first of all, banks want to understand where money is coming from, okay? So if banks can understand that the source of funds is legitimate, okay, then that's going to be very helpful for them. And so the more proof that you can provide, the more that you can prove that, hey, this is in fact where the money has come from, the better, right? That's very good for you. Likewise, they want to know that where the money is going is legitimate, right? So they want to be in a situation where they say, hey, listen, we're not going to be concerned about the nature of what's going on here, right? We want to know that you're not financing terrorism. We want to know that you're not profiting from drug trafficking, right? That's kind of the basic idea of it. And so some things that are going to go on there. Number one, banks dislike if you open up a bank account and suddenly have a massive amount of money coming in. If you're going to have that, you should really document it well and explain it well to them up front. So for instance, if you were selling a house, obviously you can understand. And there should be, the point is, the mindset of a bank, which I think is quite legitimate, is if you're really doing real business, you should be able to prove that you're doing real business. There should be a lot of supporting documentation for it, especially if you're doing large transactions, right? There's probably going to be agreements that are going to be involved. If you were buying a piece of property, there may be like some sort of a realtor listing for it. There's probably going to be the other parties who are going to be involved. You're probably going to have realtors. You're probably going to have lawyers. You're probably going to have, there's all these different parties who are involved. It should not be difficult for you to demonstrate the nature of what's going on. If you have a substantive business, which is doing millions of dollars a year in sales, you should be able to show, hey, listen, here's our employees who we're paying, right? You can see, look, we're hiring them on Upwork. Here's our results. Here's some communication with them. Here's some emails. Here's some group chats. Here's some, all this kind of stuff, right? You should be able to substantiate that for them. So that's one thing. Now, beyond that, there are certain types of things that they're going to dislike. So for instance, I'm always leery when people talk to me about the idea of, hey, they want money to come in one day and go out the next day. Banks dislike this, okay? You get something called a sweep account. And this is a concerning thing if, for instance, you're facilitating the sale of cryptocurrency, right? So somebody, basically what's going to happen? Well, somebody's going to buy some crypto for you. So they're going to transfer money to you. I don't know, say it's $5,000. And you're going to then transfer the money onto some sort of exchange or something, buy the crypto and transfer the crypto to them. Well, one of the examples here is you probably want to keep any commissions in the bank account. Now, there's this inherent problem here, this inherent tension, because for that type of person to conduct operations very efficiently, the money does need to come in and out very quickly, right? At the same time, if from the bank's standpoint, there's the story that, hey, a bank would rather you leave the money on deposit a month plus a day, right? That time lag is important to the banks, so that's something worth noting. Banks are going to typically dislike cash, right? So that's generally the case. Transactions, there's various kind of thresholds in terms of the amounts of money. Most people are familiar with this. And you can kind of see this, at least I find that you can, when you're sending wire transfers, right? If you send a wire transfer that's a few $1,000s, it's almost instant, right? It's very, very quick. And part of the reason for that is, hey, these standards of due diligence that need to go through are dramatically lower, right? If you're sending $200,000, the standards are much higher. If you're sending, again, larger amounts, it's going to trigger more scrutiny, okay? So, and this is basically as a result of a lot of abuse that has happened over time. So these rules have come about for logical reasons. The way that these rules are kind of enforced and managed is a whole other conversation. It's created a lot of bureaucracy and a lot of nuisance, but you should be able to provide documentation. Like, would somebody send you a huge amount of money without an invoice? Probably not, right? Then let's talk about, I think something that tends to be kind of lazy about people when they send wire transfers, etc., is they'll say, oh, I'm going to have you, I'm going to just mark down, payment for services or something like that. And it's logical why this would happen, right? It's just, do you want to sit there and explain what the whole nature of the transaction is? Probably not. But I think it's useful to be able to identify it specifically for what it is, right? Rather than payment of invoice, it's purchase of, Mercedes GLS 450, right? That sort of thing. So these things are worth noting. There's all kinds of really detailed rules that you can get into. So, there's whole anti-money laundering manuals that look for patterns of behavior, the types of transactions that are common amongst money launderers. And so, you could go and you could look into that and figure out, okay, well, I don't want to be regarded as something that I'm not. And so I'm going to say, look, let's make sure that my transactions are structured in a way that's more feasible. And so, that's partially routine as well, right? So I have quite a number of people who I pay every month, right? So these are staff, employees. And so, I don't know, there's however many it is. Those transactions are very consistent. You can kind of see, hey, look, every month I'm making this payment. It's very clear, right? It's clear what's going on there. Banks like this sort of consistency. They like to see, hey, every day or every week or whatever, Visa and MasterCard transactions are settled into your bank account. Every month or every 2 weeks or every week or whatever, the payments are going out to your staff. These invoices are being paid to your suppliers. You're using the same people over and over again, and you can demonstrate, hey, they have a website, here's what they bought, here's the invoice, here's the, all of this kind of stuff is helpful to you, okay? And in today's day and age where it's so hard to just get bank accounts, let alone maintaining bank accounts, that's an issue. So what are some other things that are relevant? Well, today, if the bank account is not in the same country as the company or the work, that is considered to be a red flag. This is really unfortunate because of the fact that in some places it's virtually impossible to bank today. So for instance, Malta, very hard to bank in Malta. Gibraltar, virtually impossible to bank in Gibraltar. Great place, I love Gibraltar, but hard to bank there. Cyprus has gotten much harder to bank in. Georgia is getting harder to bank in. So, you've got this, unfortunately, the nature of what has happened in the world has forced certain people who are doing legitimate business into a bad situation, right? Because you say, okay, great, I want a Maltese company, maybe for very legitimate reasons, right? Malta has a bunch of things that are good about it from a regulatory standpoint. When Malta was kind of some of the first to adopt ICO legislation, a lot of people were like, oh yeah, Malta, it's crypto island, this sort of thing. And I was like, good luck banking there. That's the problem. If you can't bank there, who cares, right? And this is something that I feel like the regulators in Malta maybe don't get, is that, hey, listen, they want to be at the cutting edge, but there's a problem. There's something similar in Isle of Man. I remember a number of years ago when before, I don't know, this was maybe 2015, something like that, and crypto was kind of an up-and-coming thing. And they were talking about, hey, Isle of Man could be this hub for cryptocurrency, but the banks kiboshed it, right? And so there really needs to be some work between governments and banks and like small business in order to facilitate this, because a bunch of the world is just insane. It's completely maddening. But because of that, it's really, really important today that you know how to maintain your accounts, right? Because if accounts it takes a lot of work to get them, and they're a hassle to have, etc., you want to be able to maintain that account and have real business, regular transactions, etc., that are easy to explain and follow, etc. So anyway, that's kind of a high level. Let's see here, what else is there? We've got, so as I said, jurisdiction can matter. The same thing is true it goes on both the sender and the receiver side. So if you're the sender and your bank account is located in a different place than your country, this is one of the reasons why a few years ago we started switching to, it used to be we could have like an Anguilla company with a bank account in Cayman Islands or something. And we said, no, We're going to deal with countries like Bulgaria, countries like Cyprus, countries like Georgia, countries like Hong Kong, etc., where we can have both of them in the same place, right? Useful and important. So, but that goes on both sides, right? The sending country and the receiving country. So you want to pay attention to both. Like I said, the thing about offices, physical office, is something that can be useful. So again, part of this is like having a relationship with your banker, and this is, again, it's getting more and more abnormal to do that because more and more business is conducted over the internet. But that being said, if you have that, it can be helpful, right? You know some of the people there, they understand your business, they understand what's going on. Being able to provide the legitimacy behind it, very useful. Sometimes it's useful, I think, to warn banks in advance about what to expect. You can say, hey, listen, I'm going to have this large transaction coming in. We did some large client transactions a number of years ago where there was like a loan between two companies, and it was a large transaction. And so what we did was we had the loan agreement sent to the bank in advance, had them look it over and make sure they were okay with it. Then once that was all good, we finalized the loan agreements and did the transfer. So that sort of thing, again, can be quite helpful when you're able to do it. So yeah, these are some of the things that you can pay attention to. And obviously, you're trying to juggle your business and all this compliance bullshit, right? That being said, this compliance bullshit is increasingly critical to the function of your business. So although we wish that as small business people, we wouldn't have to spend all this time on it, the reality is just that you need to, right? So the more that you can deal with that, the better. And anyway, so I hope that's interesting to you. Hopefully it's helpful to you. You have some things that you can consider. If you have questions, you're like, hey, look, how is it that I provide the documentation to the bank so the bank understands that what I'm doing is legitimate, etc., then please let me know. You can reach out to us. We're happy to help you through doing this because realistically, like I said, maintaining accounts today probably should be viewed as about as important as getting the accounts, because every time you lose an account and you have to set up a new one, this is a massively disruptive process. Okay, so very, very important. Anyway, subscribe to our channel, click on the bell, get some notifications, go and check out our other videos. We've got like a ton of videos. I'm trying to produce lots of content for you guys. If there's something you want to see, add it in the comments. Go and check out our websites, offshorecitizen.net, offshorecapitalist.com. If you want to do a consultation, happy to help you with something, whatever it is that is on your mind, of interest to you. It could be something to do with tax, asset protection, residencies, citizenships, banking, payment processing, hiring abroad, all these sorts of things. Reach out to us, and I will see you guys on the next video.